Disclaimer.
As of this morning, Friday, January 23rd, 2026, silver just touched $99.30 an ounce. For most people, scrolling past market updates, that's just another number flashing across their screens. But for American retirees, it's a siren's blaring warning that the financial ground beneath our feet is shifting in ways most of us haven't been told about. While the headlines celebrate your 2.8% Social Security cost of living adjustment, they're staying remarkably silent about the fact that the new $202.90 Medicare Part B premium just wiped out nearly 40% of that raise before you even saw it hit your bank account. This is the silent theft of your retirement reaching a breaking point, and silver hitting $99 is the market's way of screaming that the exit door is closing. The question everyone should be asking is simple. Why is this happening right now? The answer requires us to look thousands of miles away to Tokyo, where something extraordinary just occurred. The Japanese 10-year bond yield exploded to 2.26%, the highest level in 27 years. For context, Japan has spent decades keeping interest rates at or near zero, creating what financial insiders call the yen carry trade. Investors borrowed yen at virtually zero cost, converted it to dollars, and invested in higher-yielding assets worldwide. It was essentially free money as long as the system stayed stable. That stability just shattered. According to data from the Bank of Japan, this spike represents the unwinding of a carry trade that supported trillions of dollars in global investments. When those yields surge, investors face an immediate crisis. The money they borrowed in yen is no longer cheap. It's becoming expensive to maintain, forcing them to sell dollar-denominated assets and buy back yen to close their positions. This creates massive pressure across markets, and sophisticated money is rotating out of paper promises and directly into the only assets that can't be printed by central banks: physical silver and gold. But here's the secret. The major banks are hiding, the one that should make every retiree pay attention. A leaked Section 232 strategic audit confirms something that sounds almost impossible to believe. For every 100 ounces of silver promised on paper contracts, only 11 ounces actually exist in deliverable form in the vaults. We aren't just looking at a price increase driven by supply and demand. We're looking at a potential physical blackout where paper promises can't be converted into actual metal. Think about what that means. The COMEX exchange in New York, where silver futures trade, operates on the assumption that most contracts will be settled in cash rather than physical delivery. But when industrial users and sovereign buyers start demanding actual metal instead of paper settlements, the entire system faces a reckoning. This 11% coverage ratio isn't speculation. It's documented reality that most Americans have never heard about because it raises uncomfortable questions about the stability of our commodity markets. Right now, as I'm recording this, we're witnessing what insiders are calling the 48-hour vault lock. The United States Mint is facing pre-order exhaustion for the 250th anniversary American Silver Eagle coins set to release on February 26th. Premiums are already hitting 40% over the spot price for physical delivery. Let me translate that into real numbers. If silver is trading at $99 per ounce on paper, these physical coins are selling for close to $139 each. That's not normal market behavior. That's a sign of genuine scarcity colliding with overwhelming demand. The last time premiums reached these levels was during the height of the pandemic in 2020, when mints around the world struggled to keep up as people rushed to protect their purchasing power. But this time, there's an additional factor that makes the situation more urgent. Major industrial players are now competing directly with retail buyers for every available ounce. Reports from supply chain analysts indicate that companies like Apple and Tesla have faced production line disruptions due to silver solder shortages. When tech giants and automotive manufacturers start scrambling for the same metal that retirees are trying to buy for wealth preservation, prices can only move in one direction. Picture yourself as that 72-year-old retiree in Phoenix, Arizona, trying to make sense of all this. You spent your working life trusting that Social Security and Medicare would provide a foundation of security. You played by the rules, paid your taxes, saved what you could. Now you're watching your cost of living adjustment get consumed by healthcare premiums, while the purchasing power of every dollar you've saved slowly erodes. Meanwhile, sophisticated investors and industrial giants are moving billions into physical silver, following signals that most Americans never see in their evening news broadcasts. According to the Silver Institute, we're witnessing the 5th consecutive year of a structural deficit in the silver market. The cumulative shortfall since 2021 has reached nearly 820 million ounces. That's not a temporary imbalance. That's a fundamental reshaping of supply and demand that changes the rules for anyone trying to preserve wealth on a fixed income. To visualize this shortage, imagine lining up pickup trucks loaded with silver bars. You would need over 51,000 fully loaded trucks, stretching in a convoy from New York City to Los Angeles and back again, just to represent the silver that the world has consumed beyond what miners produced in these 5 years. That metal came from somewhere. It came from above-ground stockpiles, from recycling, from strategic reserves that are now being depleted at an accelerating rate. What happens when those stockpiles run dry? What happens when the 11% of physical metal backing those paper contracts gets exhausted? We're not talking about a hypothetical future scenario. We're talking about market dynamics unfolding right now, this morning, while most Americans are worried about their grocery bills without connecting these dots to the bigger picture. The demand driving this deficit isn't coming primarily from investors stacking coins in their safes. It's industrial applications that are absolutely essential to modern technology. Solar panels require silver for photovoltaic cells. Electronics manufacturers need it for circuit boards. The artificial intelligence boom requires massive data centers using silver solder for high-performance computing chips. Electric vehicles consume significantly more silver than traditional cars. Every priority sector that our leaders tell us represents the future depends on this one metal, and they're all competing for limited supplies. For American retirees, this creates both an immediate challenge and a strategic opportunity. The challenge is obvious. Everything silver intensive will become more expensive as manufacturers pass along rising commodity costs. The opportunity is what I'm going to break down in precise mathematical detail by the end of this video. Using a conservative multiplier based on 2025 growth rates and current supply constraints, the mathematical equilibrium price for silver in 2026 sits at $220 per ounce, once the psychological $100 barrier finally breaks. But here's what makes this moment different from every other commodity spike you've seen in your lifetime. The new 2026 IRS AI tracking algorithms are designed to flag capital gains on generic bullion sales, creating a reporting net that catches every transaction. However, Title 31, United States Code, Section 5112, provides a unique classification for American silver eagles that offers a legal layer of privacy most retirees don't know exists. This isn't about hiding assets. This is about understanding the specific protections written into federal law for certain forms of legal tender. The rules of retirement changed at 9 o'clock this morning when silver crossed $99. We're moving from a world where paper promises dominated to a world where physical reality determines who preserves wealth and who watches it evaporate. The data I'm about to show you in the next section won't appear on the nightly news because it reveals structural vulnerabilities that 4 major banks are desperately trying to manage while they unwind massive short positions in this market. If you're waiting for silver to hit $100 to confirm the trend, you need to understand something crucial. By the time mainstream media declares the breakout, premiums on physical metal will have already priced out most retirees on fixed incomes. The window of opportunity isn't measured in months or weeks. It's measured in days, possibly hours, as industrial buyers and sovereign purchasers compete for the limited physical supply still available outside bank vaults and strategic reserves. Let's talk about the evidence that most financial advisors either don't know about or won't share with you. The Silver Institute, which has tracked global supply and demand for decades, just released data that should make every American retiree sit up and pay attention. We're not just in a deficit year. We're in the 5th consecutive year where the world consumes more silver than miners can pull from the ground. 5 years. That's not a temporary supply disruption from a pandemic or natural disaster. That's a structural imbalance that fundamentally changes the game. The numbers tell a story that Wall Street analysts keep trying to downplay. Since 2021, the cumulative deficit has reached 817 million ounces. To put that in perspective, for those of us who think in terms of household budgets rather than commodity markets, imagine if your family spent $800 more than you earned every single month for 5 straight years. Eventually, you'd exhaust your savings, max out your credit cards, and face a day of reckoning. That's exactly where the global silver market stands right now. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is information that most precious metals dealers won't explain because it complicates their sales pitch. Not all of that deficit came from investment demand. In fact, the majority came from industrial applications that have nothing to do with people buying coins or bars. According to detailed breakdowns from metals consulting firm Metals Focus, industrial demand alone consumed over 550 million ounces per year on average during this period. That's factories, manufacturers, and tech companies that need silver for production, not investors speculating on price movements. What industries are driving this insatiable appetite? Start with solar panels. Every photovoltaic cell requires a precise amount of silver paste for its electrical conductivity. As countries around the world rush to meet green energy targets, solar installations have exploded. China alone installed over 216 gigawatts of new solar capacity in 2023, and each gigawatt requires roughly 30 metric tons of silver. Do the math, and you're looking at nearly 6,500 metric tons consumed just by Chinese solar installations in a single year. Then there's the artificial intelligence revolution that everyone's talking about, but few people connect to physical commodities. Those massive data centers powering ChatGPT, cloud computing, and AI model training, they require specialized servers with components that use silver solder for thermal management and electrical conductivity. NVIDIA, the chipmaker that's become synonymous with AI hardware, ships graphics processing units that contain silver in their high-performance connections. As Microsoft, Google, and Amazon race to build more data center capacity, they're creating unprecedented demand for a metal that's already in deficit. Electric vehicles add another layer to the supply crisis. A traditional internal combustion engine car uses roughly 15 to 28 grams of silver. An electric vehicle uses between 25 and 50 grams, with some luxury models using even more. Tesla alone produced over 1.8 million vehicles in 2023. Even at conservative estimates, that's over 45 metric tons of silver consumed by a single manufacturer in 1 year. Now multiply that across BYD, Volkswagen, General Motors, and every other automaker racing to electrify their fleets. Here's what should terrify anyone trying to preserve wealth on a fixed income. These industrial users don't care about price the way retail investors do. When Apple needs silver for iPhone circuit boards, or when a defense contractor needs it for military electronics, they pay whatever the market demands because the alternative is shutting down production lines worth billions of dollars. They're not checking the spot price, hoping it dips a few dollars. They're securing supply at any cost, and that creates a bidding war that retail buyers on Social Security income simply cannot win. Now let's address the elephant in the room that I mentioned earlier, the 11% coverage crisis. This information comes from a leaked Section 232 strategic audit, a report that was never intended for public consumption. The audit examined the ratio of physical silver available for delivery against the total paper contracts promising future delivery. What they found should shake your confidence in the integrity of commodity markets. For every 100 ounces of silver promised through futures contracts, options, and exchange-traded funds, only 11 ounces exist in deliverable physical form. Think about what that means. If even 20% of contract holders decided they wanted actual metal instead of cash settlement, the entire system would face an immediate shortage. There simply isn't enough physical silver to honor all the paper promises that have been written. The COMEX exchange in New York operates on a fractional reserve system, much like banks operate with deposits. They assume that most traders will settle contracts in cash rather than demanding physical delivery. For decades, this worked perfectly fine because speculators and hedge funds were happy to take profits in dollars. But something changed in the last 18 months. Industrial users started demanding physical delivery. Sovereign wealth funds from Asia and the Middle East started requesting metal instead of paper settlements. Suddenly, the 11% coverage ratio that seemed adequate became a ticking time bomb. JP Morgan Chase, HSBC, Scotiabank, and Bank of America collectively hold massive short positions in the silver market, betting that prices will fall or at least remain stable. According to data from the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the concentrated short position held by these four institutions represents over 400 million ounces of paper silver. That's roughly half of annual global mine production. They're essentially betting against the very shortage that their own industrial clients are desperately trying to navigate. What happens when these banks need to cover their short positions? They have to buy silver to close out their bets. But if physical metal isn't available at reasonable prices, they face a choice. Buy at any price to avoid default, or settle in cash and admit the paper market has decoupled from physical reality. Either scenario is catastrophic for anyone holding dollars instead of metal. But wait, there's another development that most Americans haven't heard about yet, and it changes everything we thought we knew about silver's status in our economy. As of January 2026, the Department of Defense reclassified silver from a simple precious metal to a critical material essential for national security. This reclassification came quietly, buried in a broader executive order about securing strategic supply chains, but the implications are profound. Silver is now prioritized for military electronics production. That means defense contractors get first access to available supplies before industrial manufacturers, and certainly before retail investors, trying to buy American Eagles for their retirement portfolios. The Pentagon doesn't publish exact figures, but defense industry analysts estimate that military applications consume roughly 35 to 40 metric tons of silver annually for everything from missile guidance systems to night vision equipment to naval electronics. This creates what economists call sovereign demand, a level of purchasing power that transcends normal market forces. When the United States military decides it needs silver for weapon systems, price becomes irrelevant. They buy what they need at whatever cost is required. And suppliers prioritize those orders because refusing government contracts comes with consequences. For retirees competing for the same metal, this sovereign demand effectively removes a significant portion of available supply from the market before you even have a chance to place an order with your local dealer. The timing of this reclassification isn't coincidental. It came immediately after a joint report from the Department of Commerce and Department of Defense identified vulnerabilities in our ability to source critical materials during potential conflicts or supply chain disruptions. China controls roughly 70% of global silver refining capacity. Russia is a major producer. As geopolitical tensions rise, our government recognized that dependence on adversarial nations for materials essential to military readiness represents an unacceptable risk. So now we have a situation where industrial demand was already consuming more silver than miners could produce. The paper market only has 11% physical coverage. Major banks are holding massive short positions they'll eventually need to cover. And the United States government just declared silver essential to national security. Each of these factors alone would be significant. Together, they create a perfect storm that explains why silver touched $99 this morning and why the mathematical models I'll show you in the final section point to $220 as the inevitable destination. For American retirees watching this unfold, the question isn't whether silver will continue rising. The question is whether you'll be able to access physical metal at any price once the broader market wakes up to these realities. The premiums we're seeing today on American Silver Eagles, those 40% markups over spot price, are just the beginning. When industrial buyers, sovereign purchasers, and desperate short sellers all converge on a limited physical supply, premiums could easily double or triple from current levels. This isn't fear-mongering or sales hype from someone trying to move inventory. This is the documented reality of supply and demand dynamics that anyone can verify through publicly available data from the Silver Institute, COMEX, and government sources. The difference is that most Americans won't connect these dots until it's too late, until the price has already exploded. And physical premiums have made accumulation impossible on a fixed income. Now, let's get to the mathematics that nobody in mainstream financial media wants to discuss openly, because once you see these numbers, you can't unsee them. The question every retiree should be asking right now is simple. If silver just hit $99.30 this morning, where does it go from here? The answer requires us to look at what happened in 2025 and apply some straightforward multiplication that any of us learned in grade school. Silver started 2025, trading around $45 per ounce. By the end of the year, it closed at approximately $90. That's a gain of 100%, a doubling of value in 12 months. But here's what most analysts miss when they are trying to predict future prices. The factors driving that doubling haven't disappeared. In fact, every single driver I've outlined in this video has intensified. The structural deficit deepened, industrial demand accelerated, bank short positions grew larger, the coverage ratio deteriorated further. So if we experienced a 2.2 times growth rate in 2025, when conditions were actually less extreme than they are today, what happens when we apply that same multiplier to our current $99 starting point? The mathematical equilibrium price, the level where supply and demand find temporary balance in 2026, sits at $218 per ounce. Let's round that to $220 to keep the numbers clean and conservative. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking that sounds impossible. Silver at $220? That's more than twice the current price. But remember what I just showed you. We already doubled in the last 12 months when the supply situation was better than it is now. When you're in the 5th year of a structural deficit and the 11th coverage ratio is being stress tested by industrial demand and sovereign purchases, price movements that seemed impossible yesterday become inevitable tomorrow. The key catalyst that triggers this move is the psychological barrier at $100. Human psychology around round numbers is well documented in financial markets. We saw it with gold when it approached $1,000 per ounce back in 2008. Traders and investors held back, waiting to see if the level would hold. The moment gold convincingly broke through $1,000, it rallied another $200 in just a few months. Silver is setting up for the exact same pattern, but with potentially more explosive moves, because the supply fundamentals are far more constrained than gold's ever were. Here's something most people don't understand about how industrial buyers operate in commodity markets. They don't wait for confirmation. They anticipate. Right now, procurement officers at major manufacturers are looking at silver approaching $100 and making a calculation. Do they wait and hope prices come back down, risking production delays and even higher costs later? Or do they lock in supply now, accepting today's prices as cheap compared to what's coming? Based on conversations with metals dealers who supply industrial accounts, the answer is clear. They're buying aggressively at current levels. When Apple's supply chain managers secure 6 months of silver inventory at $99, that's metal that won't be available to anyone else. When Tesla signs contracts for forward delivery at fixed prices, that's metal spoken for before it even comes out of the refinery. When the Defense Department exercises its priority allocation authority, that's metal that simply vanishes from the commercial market. Every industrial purchase made today is one less ounce available for American retirees trying to protect their purchasing power. But there's another factor we need to discuss, one that affects how you can actually accumulate and hold physical silver without triggering unwanted attention from tax authorities. The IRS has rolled out new artificial intelligence tracking algorithms for the 2026 tax year. These systems are specifically designed to flag capital gains on precious metals transactions. Every time a dealer reports a sale of generic silver bars or rounds above certain thresholds, the AI system creates a record and cross-references it against your other financial activities. The reporting thresholds are lower than most people realize. Dealers must file a Form 1099-B for single transactions of silver bars or rounds totaling 1,000 ounces or more. But the new AI systems don't just look at individual transactions. They aggregate multiple purchases over time, building profiles of buyers who are systematically accumulating precious metals. The goal is to ensure that when you eventually sell, the capital gains get properly reported and taxed. For retirees managing modest nest eggs, having the IRS monitoring your precious metals positions adds a layer of complexity and stress that nobody wants during their retirement years. However, here's where it gets interesting. And this is information that even many precious metals dealers don't fully understand or communicate to their clients. Title 31 of the United States Code, Section 5, 112, Paragraph E, provides specific language about American Silver Eagle coins that creates a unique classification under federal law. These coins are legal tender, meaning they carry a face value of $1 as designated by the U.S. government, even though their silver content is worth far more. This legal tender status creates a distinction between American Silver Eagles and generic silver products like bars or foreign coins. While the IRS requires dealers to report sales of generic silver products above certain thresholds, American Silver Eagles fall into a different category due to their legal tender designation. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not providing legal or tax advice. But what I can tell you is that the reporting requirements for legal tender coins differ from generic bullion in ways that provide an additional layer of privacy for your transactions. Think about what this means for a retiree who wants to accumulate silver as a hedge against the erosion of Social Security purchasing power. If you're buying generic silver bars, you're creating a documented paper trail that the IRS AI systems will track and eventually scrutinize when you sell. If you're buying American Silver Eagles, you're working within a legal framework that offers different reporting structures. The premiums on Eagles are higher, yes, but you're not just buying silver content. You're buying legal tender status, government backing, and a level of transaction privacy that has real value in an age of increasing financial surveillance. The premiums we're seeing today on American Silver Eagles, those 40% markups over spot that seem outrageous at first glance, suddenly make more sense when you understand the full picture. You're paying for guaranteed silver content from the U.S. Mint. You're paying for instant liquidity because dealers will buy Eagles back without question. You're paying for legal tender status that provides reporting advantages. And you're paying for the security of knowing that if the paper silver market collapses and physical premiums explode, you already hold the most recognized and trusted form of silver in the world. But here's the urgent reality we need to confront as Americans trying to preserve our retirement security. There's a price level coming that changes everything, and we're approaching it faster than most people realize. Analysts who track commodity flows and strategic materials have identified what they're calling the tariff floor at $112 per ounce. This isn't an official government policy yet, but it's being discussed in closed-door meetings at the Department of Commerce and Department of Defense. The logic is straightforward. If silver becomes critical to national security, as the January 2026 reclassification confirms, then allowing unlimited exports or foreign purchases of American-mined silver represents a potential vulnerability. At some point, our government may decide that silver exceeding a certain value threshold should be subject to export restrictions or allocated through licensing systems. $112 isn't arbitrary. It represents the calculated cost of domestic production plus a reasonable profit margin for U.S. mining operations. Once silver crosses this tariff floor, we may see policies implemented that prioritize domestic industrial users and defense contractors over retail investors and foreign buyers. This doesn't mean you won't be able to buy silver, but it means the process could become more complicated, more expensive, and potentially subject to allocation systems that favor certain purchasers over others. For retirees on fixed incomes who can't navigate complex bureaucratic systems or who do not have connections to preferred dealers, this could effectively price them out of the market even if they have cash available. The window between today as $99 and the $112 tariff floor represents perhaps the last opportunity for regular Americans to accumulate physical silver at anything close to market prices without regulatory complications. We're talking about a window of maybe $13, which at current volatility levels could close in a matter of weeks or even days. The February 26th release of the 250th anniversary Silver Eagles, already facing pre-order exhaustion, might be the catalyst that pushes prices through $100. Once that psychological barrier breaks, momentum traders and institutional buyers who've been waiting on the sidelines will rush in, and the race to 112 could happen faster than anyone anticipates. What I'm sharing with you today isn't investment advice. I'm not telling you to buy or sell anything. What I'm doing is connecting dots that most Americans never see, because our financial media is either ignorant of these dynamics or deliberately avoiding them because the implications are uncomfortable. We live in a system where paper promises have been treated as equivalent to physical reality for so long that most people can't conceive of a world where that equivalence breaks down. But that breakdown is happening right now this morning. As silver touched $99.30 and industrial buyers scrambled to secure physical delivery while paper traders bet on price declines they'll never be able to enforce if physical metal is unavailable. The four major banks holding massive short positions are facing a mathematical impossibility. They've promised to deliver more silver than actually exists in deliverable form, and sooner or later that promise will be tested. For American retirees who played by the rules our entire lives, who saved and invested according to what financial advisors told us was prudent, this moment requires us to think differently. The old assumptions about diversification into stocks and bonds, about trusting that our dollars will hold value, about believing that our government will protect our purchasing power through policy. Those assumptions are being challenged by fundamental supply and demand realities that don't care about political promises or economic theory. Silver at $220 per ounce isn't a prediction. It's a mathematical outcome of the forces already in motion. The 5-year structural deficit continues. Industrial demand accelerates with every new data center, solar panel, and electric vehicle. The 11% coverage ratio gets tested every time someone demands physical delivery instead of paper settlement. Sovereign demand removes supply from commercial markets. And millions of American retirees wake up each month to find their cost of living adjustments consumed by healthcare premiums, watching their purchasing power evaporate while the financial media tells them everything is fine. The choice facing you today is simple but urgent. Do you wait for more confirmation, for mainstream analysts to finally acknowledge what the data has been screaming for years, for silver to break through $100 and prove that this rally is real? Or do you recognize that by the time confirmation arrives, the opportunity will have already passed, premiums will have doubled or tripled, and the window to accumulate physical metal at accessible prices will have closed? The rules changed at 9 a.m. today when silver crossed $99. The game changed when Japan's 10-year yields hit 2.26% and started unwinding trillions in carry trades. The market changed when the Department of Defense reclassified silver as critical to national security. And your retirement security is changing right now, whether you acknowledge it or not, as the purchasing power of every dollar you've saved gets quietly eroded by forces most Americans don't understand until it's too late. This isn't the time for panic. This is the time for informed awareness and strategic action based on documentable facts rather than wishful thinking. The data doesn't lie. The mathematics doesn't care about our feelings. And the window of opportunity doesn't wait for anyone to feel ready. It simply closes when market forces determine that prices must rise to ration scarce supply among desperate buyers. Your retirement security depends on understanding these realities and acting while you still can. The choice is yours.